Let's talk about the running backs, the three running backs at the top of our rankings at Action Network: Aaron Jones, Leonard Fournette, Devin Singletary. Raybon, kicking it to you first here. Who is someone this week at the running back position you are high on?
I like Leonard Fournette. He got 53% of the carries, 68% of the routes run for that Tampa Bay backfield last week. And I do think that you do want to run on this Packers defense. They are 18th in DVOA against the run. They're also 28th in DVOA on targets to running backs, and that favors Fournette, who again ran 68% of the routes to 12% for Ronald Jones. We saw Fournette with a key touchdown late in that game on the bobble. So I think both potential game scripts still favor Fournette. He's getting a tiny bit more of the carries, and he's getting a majority of the route. So Leonard Fournette as a value option here in this championship round against Green Bay.
Sean, who is someone you like?
I am right there with Raybon in the Fournette call. I don't know about a value option. He's the second highest priced running back on the site.
It seems like he's a value.
Yeah, that might shy people away from him, especially this seems like a 50-50 timeshare. I mean, Ronald Jones looked great last week, but after a couple big runs, he came limping off the sideline. He's clearly not 100%. So there is potential of an in-game aggravation here where Fournette just dominates touches, but either way, Fournette's going to dominate the passing work. Raybon already mentioned, he had a 68% routes run rate, and Brady does like dumping it off to Fournette. So I think he has a really high floor here and a higher ceiling than people realize. Like I said, Ronald Jones, he's less than 100%. There could be a potential scenario where Fournette ends up being true workhorse back. So it's a pretty brutal running back slate. So I think spending up to get Fournette here makes a ton of sense.
I think the slate might be slightly better than anticipated, but that's if Edwards-Helaire is out for the Chiefs. And I mean, early in the week, it's not as if you can really project whether someone is in or out, but based on the practice reports last week with Edwards-Helaire, where he did practice on Wednesday and then did not practice on Thursday and Friday, that feels as if they didn't say he had a setback, but that is the pattern that you see if a guy has a setback in practice. So given that, I'm kind of inclined to think, at least right now, that Edwards-Helaire is unlikely to play. And if that's the case, then we see something pretty close to what we saw last week, where Williams is actually the lead back and Le'Veon Bell is, a
Sean McCoy.
Yes.
From last year.
Yes, exactly. Where he's just a guy and they give him a couple of carries because it's like, hey, you're a veteran, but otherwise they're letting Darrell Williams do the actual work in the backfield. And if it's a situation where Mahomes is out, I could see them leaning all the more on the running game. So Williams is someone I'm intrigued by right now and definitely keeping an eye on. And Buffalo, I think if you had to say which part of their defense is the weakness, it is their running game. So I think they can be run on, and it might be a situation where more than usual, we see the Chiefs desirous to run the ball. So Williams is someone, again, the caveat, we have to wait to see what happens with Clyde Edwards-Helaire, but Williams is someone I'm definitely keeping an eye on as we approach the weekend. Sean, who is someone you are low on?
Well, I wouldn't call him, say I'm low on him because he's my number one ranked running back, but Aaron Jones at his price, I already mentioned this is sort of a terrible running back slate. I think it makes sense to spend down at running back so you can, spend up at wide receiver and, get Travis Kelce in the tight end slot. So if there's one guy that's probably worth fading, it's Aaron Jones. It's a tough matchup. We already mentioned that Vita Vea might return. That's going to bolster this run defense even more. I think A.J. Dillon saw the first carry last week. And then, of course, Jamal Williams had way more work than I anticipated. So, we'll have to monitor the injury report on A.J. Dillon. If he's ruled out, I'll probably have some shares of Aaron Jones. But you got to, pick your spots who you're going to fade in this slate. And I think Aaron Jones, he always has to do a lot with his 15 touches, and he usually does come through. But this is one of those weeks where if you fade him, he has a chance to bust. So I think that might be the way I go with this particular slate.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to argue with the idea that you don't want to be on the running back who's going against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers because they're strong in run defense and also strong in pass defense against running backs. So, pretty easy to think that maybe, especially for DFS, you're investing elsewhere. Raybon, I think you also are low on Aaron Jones.
Yeah. Like, and this is again, it's a salary play, and when people are playing DFS, one of the pieces of advice I like to give is if whether you're just on the site or you're using our Fantasy Labs models, go to the Flex tab and sort by price and kind of get a lay of the land from that perspective. So this week we have Stephon Diggs at 7K. I still think he's a high floor option and worth the 500 over Jones. But then you have Jones at 65. Mike Evans at 58. So there's kind of just one player, Aaron Jones, between 7K and 5.8. And I think he's likely to not live up to that price tag. And you also have in that same range, Aaron Rodgers, Josh Allen, and Tom Brady. So you can only spend, 60 plus on so many players. And I just think pretty much every player surrounding Jones and in his price range is a better value. But I'll also talk about Ronald Jones. So both Jones, I think I'm low on in this one. Ronald, his numbers look similar to Fournette in the run game, 62 yards on 13 attempts. But I think looking at the potential for Tampa Bay to get down in this game a little more, they're going to Green Bay and him only getting 12% of the routes, I think there's a potential for him to have a really low floor. We've seen Tampa Bay abandon the run in the past. And, Sean mentioned it. Jones looks banged up and Fournette simply looks like the better back right now. So Jones, I think, is going to be kind of a contrarian maybe play. Maybe he gets ownership because he's 4,600, but I still rather go Singletary, even though Buffalo didn't run essentially till the third quarter. I do think Buffalo will run a little bit more against KC. Singletary played 83% of the routes and got all but 2 of the carries in the backfield. So you're just getting a much higher, I think, ceiling from Singletary for $100 lower, even though you still run the risk of Buffalo not running much. I think Ronald Jones is a bigger risk.
I'm with you that Ronald Jones is a bigger risk. I'm still off of Singletary though. Like the matchup is good. The Chiefs defense is bottom 3 in rush DVOA and pass DVOA against running backs. There's no Zach Moss. So as you say, Singletary, he's the clear lead back there. But last week the Bills won by 14. Singletary had the job all to himself, and he still had just 7 carries and 3 targets, even with all the snaps he was seeing. It's just a situation where the Bills right now are not prioritizing the running game. And in the passing game, Singletary isn't enough of a factor really to be included there. So, I mean, I get that he has, I think, the higher floor and the higher ceiling than Ronald Jones, but Singletary is still someone I really don't want much of. Sean, do you have any thoughts on Singletary before we get to the player prop?
No, I'm with you on that. Last week, I was fairly high on him. Obviously, that was disappointing. I agree. I don't think they're going to try to establish the run here, so I'm off him. But one quick point I forgot to mention when it came to Aaron Jones was that I'm fading him, but I'm also going to use Jamal Williams as a leverage play. He saw 4 carries inside the 10-yard line last week, so I think on a small slate like this, that's one of the things that you can do to differentiate is fade a guy, but also use the guy that would benefit if he were to bust. So I'll have a few shares of Jamal Williams this week.
Mm-hmm. All right. So last week, go ahead, Raybon.
I just want to say one more thing on Singletary. So I do agree that, Buffalo, there's a really low floor, but I do want to point out, I think he's viable in tournaments because the week before against Indianapolis, and Indianapolis plays some cover two shell. So, the 2 safeties are back a little bit more. Baltimore is a lot of blitz, safeties up closer to the line, or they're playing man. So it's a total different defense. But Buffalo ran 58 plays against the Colts. And Moss and Singletary combined for 10 carries, but also 7 targets. So that's, on 17 of their 58 plays, the running back got the ball. And that's, that could be, if their plays are in the mid 60s, that could be a 20 touch game for Singletary. So I will say in tournaments, even though I'm low on him, as a cash game play in tournaments, I do think there's some viability there.
All right. Sean, I believe last week your player prop for running backs was actually scrimmage yards for Singletary. What is your player prop this week?
So we've kind of mentioned both guys, but I'm going with Who's going to have more rushing yards this week, Ronald Jones or Leonard Fournette? I have both at 47, so I want you guys to help me break the tie here.
Leonard Fournette, because he's getting more carries and he looks healthier.
Well, I think Leonard Fournette getting more carries doesn't mean he'll get more rushing yards.
Yeah.
No, that's fair. But
he's obviously going to dominate the receiving work. So if you think he's going to also dominate the rushing game, he's a smash play for you, I bet. So
I don't think he's going to dominate the rushing game, but I'm just going off last week. And like in a one-game sample, it's hard for me to differentiate. Like I have Ronald Jones getting 0.1 yards per carry more. You know what I mean? Like it's hard for me to separate give too much variance in terms of the team versus the team running backs versus the individuals in a one game, just projected for one game. So I have Fournette I have Fournette at 11 carries and Jones at 8 for this week.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So I'm trying to think about what was the split last week. It was 17 and 13. I have Raymond, I'm actually fairly similar to where you are on the split. I have 11.1 carries for Fournette, 9.8 carries for Jones, which means that I have Fournette projected for 46.5, and I have Jones projected for 47. So
see, that's what I'm saying.
It's
so you guys have more of a split between their 2 yards per carry averages, is what I'm
saying.
Yes.
For sure. And last week the game plan was let Fournette start, get a couple series, and then it was going to become a hot hand approach. That could be different this week. It could just start off the hot hand approach, at least in terms of, the rushing game. So I think last week they eased Jones in, but this week it could be much more of a timeshare and potentially. So I have Ronald Jones getting more carries this week. But I'm with Friedman. I have, Jones having a way higher yards per carry. So I have him tied at 47.
Yeah, I mean, I have Jones 0.5 yards more, but I like my gut feels like Fournette is the better call because he's going to have, I think he's likelier to have more carries. But I will go with Jones. I will honor my projections and go with Jones.